Hi everyone, and welcome back to the series of building a Laravel Voyager financial website. I'm Gority Golden, and in today's video we are going to plan the database of our financial website project by creating an entity relationship diagram, commonly known as an ERD. So before we actually get started, you must know what an ERD is, and an ERD is also known as an entity relationship model. It's always a simple visual diagram that shows how different tables in our database are connected. And just like you can see, it is also a graphical representation that depicts relationships among people, objects, places, concepts, or events in an information system. So it's more like a map for your project that helps you to organize the data before you even start thinking about implementation of the project. So you always need an entity relationship diagram, especially if you're going to work with a software development life cycle. So having planned about the project and then having done the requirements gathering and analysis of the functional and the non-functional requirements of the project, then you would move to designing. And in terms of designing, one of the key tasks that you would do is designing the ERD so that you have a clear picture of the database schema. So without an ERD, it's very easy to get confused when your project grows. So the ERD always helps us to plan better and also to avoid database mistakes, especially when you start the part of implementation. So there are a number of ERD notations. In case you're new to ERDs, you can check out, for example, the chain notation. And when you look at the chain notation, the entities and relationships are boxes and diamonds. So in terms of an ERD, you have to also understand that we look at what an entity is. So an entity is always a distinct object that we are going to record within the database. So you can always think about an entity, for example, as an object. So for example, when you look at this project, you're going to see that we are going to have a number of entities that are going to be recorded in the database, like the users, the hero sections, and etc., as we are going to see. So in terms of the notations, we do have the chain notation, and just like you can see, with the chain notation, the entities are always represented as boxes. If I try to open this in a new tab, you can see that this is an entity book, and the attributes are always in an oval format or an oval shape. The relationships are always represented with a diamond, just like you can see this. So that is always the chain notation. And on the other hand, if you do not choose to work with a chain, perhaps you can work with the crow's foot, and this is one of my favorites. We have the crow's foot notation. So when you check out the crow's foot notation, you can pretty see that in this type of ERD notation, an entity is represented by a rectangle with its name on the top. So when you check out this, you can get more insights on this kind of notation. And I gave you some insights on the entity, which is a representation of a class of object. It can be a person, place, etc. But entities always do depend on the projects that you're having on. So you can have different entities if it is a different project. And sometimes some entities are similar. For example, the commonest entities that you're always going to have on most of the projects is the entity for the user. So you must take note of that. So you can see that in the crow's foot notation, an entity is represented by a rectangle with its name on the top, and the name is always singular rather than plural, just like you can see this. And then you must take note of attributes, which are more like the characteristics that each entity is always going to have, or it can also be known as a property or a feature for each entity. So if we do have an entity like a student, then we can have attributes like the student ID, the first name, last name, the date of birth, and etc. So if you're new to ERDs, you can check out this a little bit precise, and of course taking note of the multiplicities or the types of the relationships that each entity is going to be associated with the other. Yeah, so this is it for now, but let's focus on our project. Now when you look at our project, we are going to have a number of features. So for each feature we are going to have a number of entities that we are going to work with. So in terms of the core user management feature, we do have the users, and each user is going to have an ID, then the name, the email verified at, and then the password. So one other thing about the entity relationship diagram, you must have knowledge on database management systems, because this is one of the things that we always work with while we are going to model our database schemas. So I do believe that now you have insights on what an entity is and what are the attributes that we are going to have. In case I did not explain them furthermore, you can always check out these other resources so that you learn more in detail. But for now, that is it. So we are going to have the user's entity, and these are some of the attributes that I have identified as of now. And in addition, we are going to have website home content. And in terms of the website home content, we are going to have the hero section entity, and it's going to have the ID, which is going to act as the primary key. Then we are going to have the title, the description, the type, and the button text, which can be optional. Then we also have the cursor images. So each cursor image is going to have an ID, a title, a description, and then the image path. And in terms of the account types and features, we're going to have the account type entity, and it's going to have the ID, the title, the description, and the image. You know that if we are working with a financial website, we tend to work with a number of account types. So we can have an account type for a savings account, we can have fixed accounts, we can have joint accounts, and etc. So that is the reason of this entity. And in addition, whenever we do have the account type, then we do believe that we can have the account type features. Like for each account type, for example, if it is a savings account type, we do believe that it's going to have unique features that are quite different from maybe a fixed account. So since we are going to be building an ERD, just like it sounds, an entity relationship diagram, you can see that we do have a relationship. We do have the word relationship. So the relationships always mean that we are going to have associations between different entities. How does, for example, the account type associate with the account type features? How are these two related? So that is how we are going to be able to identify the relationships, and we shall have the ability of adding a number of relationship types like a one-to-many, a one-to-one, and etc. Then you can see that for this account type features, it belongs to an account type. That is why I'm passing in a foreign key, which is now a primary key of the account type that is being referenced in this entity. Then we also have the account type benefits, which are going to be the benefits that are going to be provided for each account. And just like we did for the features, each account type is going to have a number of benefits, and each benefit is going to be belonging to a particular account type, and therefore we also have to keep track of the benefit that we are providing for that account. And then in terms of why save with us, we are going to have a section for that. Then we therefore need an entity to keep track of that information, since most of the information on the website is going to be dynamic. And as of now, in terms of the attributes for this entity, we do have the ID, the title, the description, and the icon. And then the services section is going to have entities like the service types. What are the services that this site is going to be providing? And for each service type, we are going to have the ID, the name, and the description, and alongside the images. And then we do have the service details and etc. Then in terms of the member management, we are going to be having members register up or sign up using this platform. and we must take note of their title, the first name, or we can keep it precise in terms of their biography or their personal information. And then we are also going to be having a section that is going to be displaying the client testimonials. And we do believe that at this point of time, these are going to be members of our project. So therefore, we shall be passing in a member ID in here, and then the title, and then the testimonial. Then on the other hand, the partners and affiliations, like the partners that this site is going to partner with, and then the background information, where we shall keep track of information about the company, the mission and the vision, the core values, the team members and etc. Then the contact management, part of the social media management, the blogs and FAQs and etc. So this is it. This is a summary of what we are going to be building. And for some entities, I haven't added the attributes, but we shall be adding these along the way. But one thing that is true, at least you can say that for each entity, we do have a unique identifier all through. We do have the ID. And when you read furthermore in terms of database management systems, you are going to learn about the integrity constraints, or what are the rules that must be followed while creating database schemas. So as of now, you can see that for each entity, I'm actually enforcing the entity integrity constraint, which states that each entity must have a primary key, and the primary key must not be null. So we are going to be using this guide for us to come up with an entity relationship diagram that is going to guide us on how we are going to design the database schema for this project. So without any further ado, I'm going to be working with draw.io, which is one of my favorite case tools, but you can actually work with your favorite case tool because we do have a number of them. You can check out Lucidchart and etc. just in case you do not want to work with draw.io. But anyway, so if you are working with draw.io, the first thing that you have to do is to create a new diagram, most especially if the project is new. And you must assign a new name to this ERD diagram. So this is going to be Laravel Voyager financial website. And by default, whenever you're creating new instances of draw.io, all instances always have a draw.io file extension. So since we are going to create a new ERD, you must choose an entity relationship diagram, and then you click on create. So you can always choose where you want to store this, but as of now, I feel like I can have it created within my Google Drive, and by default the type is always an XML file, which is okay, so you can click on save. Yeah, so it's going to take some time while it's inserting this, and as you can see, our name has been assigned, and this is the interface for draw.io, and currently I'm working with an online interface. I'm actually not working with draw.io locally, so this is online. So by default, if you do create a new ERD while working with draw.io, it's going to give you some default entities and attributes for each entity that you can customize. Yeah, so currently we do have customers, orders, and shipments, but you can see that these are not in line with what we are going to build. So we are going to have this edited such that they match what we are going to build. And yes, if this is the first time you are working with draw.io, you can have a quick tour of the features. But most of the times in terms of draw.io, on the left panel, we always have the elements that you can always use to draw different objects. So this is general. We do have a rectangle. You can take some time and go through this. Then on the other right panel, we do have details on how you can customize, like styling each entity. For example, if I click on this, it shows you the style, the text, if you want to arrange and etc. Then you can choose to work with a full screen. pretty much. So you can take time and go through this interface. So as of now, I want us to start working on our ERD by us focusing on designing the main entities. So before we design our ERD, you can have a look at the database that I had currently designed in terms of the tables. And so you need to know that a database is a shared collection of logically related data, and the logical part of it comes in terms of the entities, the attributes, and the relationships. So these are some of the tables for this project that we are going to be working with, and I had already migrated these, but we are going to be building everything once again from scratch. And for example, when you look at the hero sections, then the structure, you can see that we do have the primary key, which is the ID, then the title, which is unique. So there is a unique constraint for the title, then the subtitle, which is also unique, then the type, then the button text, and then the background image, and then the timestamps. So when you try to scroll, I'm actually working with XAMPP, and this is phpMyAdmin. And in terms of phpMyAdmin, the constraints are always defined at the bottom, and then the cardinality already shows the number of records that are already stored within the table, or the number of rows. So if I check out the browse section, you can see that this is some of the data that I do have. So I want us to design this ERD with reference to some of those tables in terms of their attributes. So now we are going to be following this document according to the features of the project. So you can see we are having core user management, and it's having the user entity. Now with the fact that I'm not going to be keeping track of like who has entered a particular item, we can first of all start with these other entities, because I'm not going to be passing in a user ID for all these other entities. And we can start by working with the hero section. So we are going to have the hero section, and the hero section is going to have an ID. So we can keep this precise by typing ID. And to ensure that we are enforcing the entity integrity constraints, we must have a primary key, and the primary key must not be null. So when you're drawing an ERD, the first thing that you have to do is identifying the name, the attribute name. So this is ID, then you go ahead and define the data type. So the ID is going to be of type int, and then you pass on the constraints. So the ID, since it's going to act as a primary key, it must not be null. So this is defined as not null in terms of SQL. And sometimes you can also go ahead and pass in the auto increment. That is if you really want to work with that, but most of the database management systems like MySQL actually always auto increment primary keys, especially if they're of type int. So we can keep that there for now. Now when you look at our guide, we have hero sections with attributes like the title, the description, the type, and then the button text. So therefore, if I'm to pass in the title, this is going to be the title, which is the attribute, and then you follow this up with the data type. So the title is going to be a string, but when you're working with SQL, we do have string types, but these are represented with the varchar, or the variable character. And still with database management systems, we always work with domain integrity constraints that define the range of the values that must be expected in a particular column. So if we are going to have the title must at least have minimum characters of, let's say, 150, and then it's going to be unique. So this is how we pass in a unique constraint, and it's not going to be null, so we can say not null. So sometimes you can actually draw the ERD with the domains defined, or like the constraints and all this, or sometimes you can just have the entity and then the attributes. For example, ID, title, without you going ahead to define the constraints and the data types. I think it's also acceptable. But in this one, we are going to ensure that we do have the data type so that it guides us while creating our tables when we start implementing the tables. So after the title, we can duplicate this, and we did have a description, then the type. Then the description is also going to have a type, so the description can take on text. Then description is the same as subtitle, so actually for now I have updated this to have the description instead of the subtitle, which is also okay. And this is being unique, so whenever we do have a constraint of not null, it means that this attribute is going to be required. So it's going to be mandatory for us to pass in the details for the description while creating a hero section instance. So having created this, we can still duplicate and have the type, and the type is going to be a string. We are going to have a number of hero sections for different pages. That is why we need the type. So I can keep the type as still my bad. This is type. Then it's also going to be a variable character. We can still do 150 characters maximum. So the type is going to be unique and it should not be null. So having added that there, then we have the button text. So the button text, that means that we are going to have a feature for the button on the user interface, in that we can have a simple button, maybe that is displaying something like more info or a redirection to some other page, but that can be nullable, it can be optional. So therefore, we can have the button text attribute, then it's going to be a string as well, which is denoted with a variable character. Then you can have a maximum of 100, and sometimes it can actually be similar, so we do not have to pass in the unique constraint. And like I had said, it can be optional sometimes, so we do not have to pass in the not null. So by default, if you do not pass in the not null constraint, it therefore makes an attribute optional. We also need the background image, so you can have this as the background image. So this can be background image, or it can also be image, but you must ensure that the attributes are also descriptive enough, and therefore it means that we must add that attribute here. So we are going to have the background image, and the background image is also of type string, which is a variable character, and we can have maximum of 250 characters. And to ensure that the hero section is neat, we shall ensure that the background images are not null. Then you can also maximize this entity. So once you have the background image, then I think that is it. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that every entity is going to have timestamps, so that you keep track of when an entity was created and when it was updated. And simply put, timestamps always provide us with a created at and an updated at for each entity. That is if we have defined the timestamps on that entity. So for example, when you look at this database, when you look at this table schema or the table structure, you can see that we do have a created at timestamp and then an updated at timestamp. So the other thing about a timestamp is that the timestamp data type is always made up of a combination of the date and the time stored together, or the date and time values stored together. So if I check out timestamps here, you can see that it is a record of the date and time an event occurred, often used in programming to track data creation, modification, or access. So for example, if we try to look at the data, some data that has been added, try to look at one of these. When you look at this data, you can see that it was created last year in that month, and then on that date, then this is the time. So commonly, the timestamp is always going to have the date and time stored within that particular cell together. So therefore, since we are going to be having created that and updated that timestamps, I don't think I think it's better we keep it precise, just that at the back of your mind you will know that we are going to have that added for each entity. So I'm not going to be adding the timestamps here, but you should know that they're going to be used all through for each entity. So having created that, then we can now switch to the next entity, which is the Corazzo image. So Corazzo images, that means that we are going to have Corazzo. We are going to have a Corazzo image entity, and like I had said initially, all entities must have a primary key. So we are going to have the ID, which is an integer, and then not null, and PK stands for primary key. Then back to our guide, each Corazzo image is going to have a title, and then a description, and then the image path. So we are going to have the title, which is a variable character, so varchar, and then it's not going to be null, so not null. Then we have the description. Description is always going to be a text. Then we can either make it optional or not nullable. So then we also have the image path. So you can always duplicate. You select this, then duplicate this attribute. So the Corazzo image is going to be characterized with the image path. Then for now I want to remove these other relationships, and we can delete this so that we make use of the entities that we do have. And we do not have a relationship between the hero section and then the Corazzo image. And yeah, I think that is all for the image Corazzo. Then after the home content, we do have the account types. Now with the account types, we are going to have account types working hand in hand with the features. Actually, the account types are going to have features and then the benefits. You can see that I'm passing in a foreign key on the account type, features, and then same applies to the benefits. So therefore, I can make use of this entity, so you can copy and paste, and then you can always drag it. So when I drag it here, you must update the name of the entity to account type. So this is account type, then each entity must have a primary key, and the account type is going to have the title, the description, and then the image. That means that this is okay, but we do not have a foreign key here, and I also do believe that it is the same case for the Corazzo, so this is not there. And yeah, so having we designed this, we can now go ahead and duplicate the account type so that we have a design of the account type benefits. So whenever you're having a name for the entity, in that it's having more than one word, you can work with a Pascal naming conversion, whereby each letter for each word starts with a capital letter. So this is going to be account type. Then we need the benefit. So account type benefit, and you can see that each name for each entity is always in a singular format. Therefore, the account type benefit is going to have primary key for the account type. So we are going to have this copied up very fast and pasting it here. So account type, and we have to define this is going to be an integer, and each account type benefit must have an account type ID. So therefore it must not be null once we have the account type benefit. And since it is a primary key being stored within the account type benefit, it exists in the account type, then that means that this is a foreign key. So a foreign key is just an attribute in one table that references to a primary key in another table. And then for the account type benefit, we have the benefit itself for this account, and the benefit is now going to be a string, and we do not have any image, so we can delete this and also ensure that we delete this whole row. Then after the account type benefit, we also have, my bad, we are going to have the account type feature. So I can have this updated to account type feature, and instead of the benefit, this is going to be the feature. In terms of ERDs, you can see that we always have a relationship for the word. So we must ensure that we are passing in relationships to entities that are associated together. And association depends on the type of relationship between those entities. So since the account type benefit and the account type features are child entities of the account type, it therefore means that an account type can have one or more benefits, and then an account type can also have one or more features. To enforce the relationship, we can start with the account type and then the benefit. So since an account type can have one or more benefits, that means that it is a one-to-many relationship. So with relationships, if we are starting from the parent to the child entity, that means that we can draw it from here, from the primary key. For example, from this primary key, then I can point it to the foreign key. So from the account type to the account type benefit, it is a one-to-many, meaning that an account type can have one or more benefits. So now if we are to attach the relationship type from the account type to the account type benefit, it means that it's going to be a one-to-many. So therefore you access the style, and then the style panel, you can see we have the lines, then we have the line end, and then the line start. So we started from this side and we are ending this side. So therefore, in terms of the end, this is what we have, and we have identified that as a one-to-many. So this is going to be a one-to-many. So it's a one-to-many from the account type to the account type benefit, and then from the account type benefit to the account type, it is a one-to-one. So you access this path or that edge, and then come and update that to a one-to-one. Then having added that, we also saw a relationship between the account type and then the feature, which is also a one-to-many. You can also try to style this to look neat. Then we also have why save with us, and with the why save with us, we can see that we just have the ID, the title, then the description, and then the icon. Yeah, so we can just have this by just making use of what you already have. Whenever you're trying to design, you must ensure that your entities will have normalized tables when we start designing the tables as well. So you must ensure that you do not allow redundant data. So this is why save with us. So why save with us is also going to have a primary ID or a primary key, then the title, then the description, and then the icon. So we can just edit this. Currently you can see that these tables are independent. They do not have any association with these other entities, so we do not have to add the relationships between these. For example, I save with us with the carousel image and then with the hero section. All these are independent. They have no relationships between them. Then after the why save with us, we have the services that are going to be offered. We have the service types. So the service type has the ID, the name, the description, and then the image. So I can just copy this and paste it here. So this is going to be the service. My bad, it's the service type. So this is the service type, and each service type is going to be having the ID, the name, the description, and then the image. So instead of the title, this is going to be the name, the description, and then the image. I believe the image can be nullable for a service type.